I am Chris Wenger. I work as a speech therapist. I started off as a special education teacher. My dad worked with adaptive PE, so in high school, and out of high school I got to go work with him and really loved it. He always encouraged me. He said, you know what? Help the kids that need the most help and you will always win the race. And I said, you know what? I am in. So I pursued a career in special education and got into working with students more on a smaller scale in speech pathology. Working with teens is my passion. That's the age group that I find myself to really make a big impact with. My day in the life as a high school-based speech therapist is a lot of fun because I start my day off. I park in the parking lot and we have two of our classes that have students with more extensive supports. Some of them are non-speaking. We have more one-to-one aids and greater ratio of student to teacher ratio. At the high school level, it's a little bit different than elementary school. We have different periods, for classes, English, and then the kids transition to history, and then they transition to art. So I balance my schedule based on students' interest, as well as who I know is going to maybe create a bond and an interest. For speech, they come in, and we just kind of leave it open-ended, honestly. I don't really have too much structure. Too much structure is more compliance-based. Neurodiversity affirming approaches allow the student to have their interest built in the sessions rather than having to earn what their interests are. In doing that, I'll kind of have activities laid out that they get to choose from, and we'll build conversations and language and expression and all of our IEP goals based on creating a natural environment. There's a big dynamic that changes for all of us in life when it comes to how we connect and interact in friendship. So when we're in preschool, kindergarten, second grade, the teacher structures activities with everybody in these small little herds, and everybody's kind of your friend. All right, all your friends, get your friends. We're gonna go on the monkey bars and the slides. Around middle school is when it all changes because identity groups are starting to be formed. Little groups, peer groups. So you've got your sports players that become groups, your goth and your emo kids and your cheerleaders, and there's just like these groups. So the dynamic of friendships and connections change. That's where it gets really challenging at the high school level. So like your neurodivergent students who aren't like their typical peers start to identify this, and that's where it can potentially lead to some isolation. For me, that's where my passion is how do we get kids to enjoy going to school and connected with peer groups and feel like they're part of a community. That's like a huge piece. So that's one reason why I love working with adolescents, because of that dynamic. That's my passion, is how do I get people to feel connected, feel safe, feel regulated, and how do we support their mental health? That's like such a big thing. If we can help students not feel like they're constantly in fight or flight mode, or feeling like they are going into freeze or fun where they're people pleasing, they're not always down in that part of their brain. It's like the part of the brain that has the alarm, like the spidey sense. Like if they're more regulated and feeling calm, then we're gonna get a lot more learning and a lot more regulation and a lot less mental health challenges in the future. Let's create more inclusive environments. And by inclusive, I mean thoughtful inclusion, where we're identifying what students need and we create an environment that suits who they are. That might not always be like pushing everybody into a general education class. That might be like, hey, maybe this student requires a little bit more of a restricted environment to meet their needs, so they're staying regulated rather than constantly living in fight or flight. And that way we're taking care of their mental health in the future. That's always like the standpoint. I think the other thing too, in addition to inclusion, is to create like really changing environments. If we had that kind of world where you can go to Disneyland and you can go to the mall and it lets you know like, different sensory needs, like that ride at Disneyland is going to be at a level 5 on the noise factor. The smell factor is a level 2. The bright lights are at a level 4. You're like, I don't know if I want to go on that ride. Like, it'd be kind of nice to know that stuff in advance, you know? And that's in all contexts. So like if we created a world where we just were having some accommodations, and it's going that way, you know, and I think that people are becoming more educated on how we can include others. Being neurodivergent myself, I was that kid in elementary school who was constantly out of his chair, bouncing off the walls in the back of the class, getting in trouble and sent home quite often. So I know that experience. That experience sucks. It seems like I have it all together right now, but this is like, I've been doing this for a long time. So it was like a journey. Every day it's like, this worked well, and now I'm going to learn this. And then it's like, then things dissipate for a little bit. So I think for myself, it's the same way I would teach students and the education system, which is try to find outlets to pull out the strengths. That's one of the big things. Like, what are your strengths? What are your interests? And then how can we work towards those strengths and interests to lead towards something that's fulfilling for you? Like, find your passion, find the things that you like. Happiness doesn't come from, you know, X amount of money. I mean, obviously you have to have some money to get through, but happiness comes from having a fulfillment, finding some things that you're interested in. And I think that's really the stepping stone for many of us, especially like myself being neurodivergent. I think if I were to speak to students, I would tell them, hey, being different's okay. If I were going to speak to families, I would say some things are going to be hard, some things are going to be challenging. And during those challenging moments, we would remind ourselves, because I'm a parent, that like, hey, that was a challenging moment, but I'm still doing the best with what I can. I'm still a good parent, even though that moment was hard. Trust in like what my safety and nervous system's telling me when certain things happen. My body will let me know, like, well, I don't know, my kid's not really feeling comfortable in this situation, or there's a certain approach or a therapist or an activity that really seems to be dysregulating time and time again. I think if I were to give advice to therapists, or just messages, or not even advice, I guess, I always step back on the thought that when you meet somebody or you have a client or you have a student, you want to leave them better than you found them. You want to help the people that need the most help in the room. You get into the job because we're here to help and to serve, and that is kind of how we keep the globe moving along, right? So yeah, therapists are, and everybody, I think that's really the key to understanding that neurodiversity affirming techniques, strategies, and approaches are the wave of the future. That's how we really help.